You ever open your front door thinking you're about to grab the mail and instead come face to face with a suburban SWAT team made entirely of delusional HOA fanatics? Yeah, that was my morning. I'd just sat down with my coffee, scrolling through the news, when I caught a weird reflection in my window. At first I thought maybe it was a delivery, or one of those solar panel salesmen pretending they've got an appointment. But no, what I saw made me pause mid-sip. 4 people were standing dead center on my walkway like they were about to execute a search warrant. Matching outfits, cheap sunglasses, clipboards tucked under arms, even a walkie-talkie strapped to one of their hips, like she just got promoted from mall security to junior deputy of nothing. And standing in front of them, arms crossed, chin raised, like she was preparing to deliver the Gettysburg Address, was Karen. Not just any Karen, but the one who treated this HOA like her personal dictatorship. You know the type. Short dyed hair, always one complaint away from calling the city, face permanently locked in a scowl like she's mad you're breathing too loud. Now I've had run-ins with Karen before. She's yelled at me about how I park, how I mow, even accused me of intimidating the community because I didn't wave back one time. But this was next level. She wasn't alone, and these people clearly thought they were on some official mission. As I stood there watching them, like I was looking at a rejected Power Rangers squad, Karen marched up and actually knocked on the door with the back of her knuckles like she owned the place. I hadn't even opened it fully when she started talking. "You are in direct violation of community codes and regulations," she announced, like she was reading off a citation from a clipboard she wasn't even holding. "We are here to take action, immediate action." I blinked. Was this woman seriously standing on my porch, acting like she had legal authority? I stepped out slowly, still trying to figure out whether this was a prank, a weird dream, or if someone had slipped something in my coffee. But no, she was dead serious, and behind her, her little group of wannabe enforcers nodded like bobbleheads. One had a plastic-looking badge clipped to his polo. Another was holding some kind of laminated card, like it was a law enforcement credential. The third one just stood there, arms folded, looking like he was trying really hard to channel Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson, but mostly resembled a tired dad on his 3rd HOA meeting of the week. Karen didn't even let me speak before jabbing a piece of paper toward my chest. "You have been repeatedly warned. There is now no alternative. The HOA is exercising its right to detain you for non-compliance." I stared at her for a second. Deadpan. Detain me. Was this real? I looked down at the paper she was waving. It was printed off what looked like Microsoft Word, with a bad HOA logo pasted at the top and some bolded text that might as well have said, "We make stuff up for fun." But Karen stood there like she was a judge, jury, and bounty hunter wrapped into one. "Due to multiple unresolved violations," she continued, "we are authorized to initiate community-level detention until a formal hearing can be scheduled." I had to stop myself from laughing out loud. These people really thought they could arrest me with what? A clipboard and a dream. I leaned back against the doorway and gave her a look. "Detention, huh? You bringing lunch trays too, or just orange jumpsuits?" She didn't flinch. She pointed at one of her goons, this stocky guy who clearly hadn't jogged since 2009, and barked, "Do it!" And that's when things went completely off the rails. This man, with full confidence and zero shame, reached into his cargo shorts and pulled out plastic handcuffs. I kid you not. Bright, shiny, toy store grade plastic cuffs, the kind you find in the dollar aisle for Halloween costumes. He held them up like he was waiting for applause. "You're coming with us," he grunted, chest puffed up like he was about to make the citizen's arrest of the century. I took a long, slow breath, stepped forward, and said the calmest thing I could. "You really sure about this?" They were. That was the wildest part. These 4 people had worked themselves into such a frenzy of fake authority. that they genuinely believed they had the right to detain me in my own front yard, in front of my own house, for supposed crimes like repainting my garage or having a truck that they didn't like the look of. They thought those fake HOA rule books they printed off the internet somehow trumped actual law. But here's the twist. What Karen didn't know, what they all didn't know, is that I work for Homeland Security, not a security company, not Neighborhood Watch, the real deal. Federal badge, government-issued ID, years of training and authority that actually holds up in court. I let it hang in the air for a second, then calmly reached into my pocket and pulled out my wallet. I flipped it open slowly and showed them the badge. That silence? You could have heard a pin drop on a carpet. Karen's smug face collapsed instantly. One of the guys took an actual step back. The other two looked at each other like they'd just realized the movie they were acting in had turned into a documentary, and they were the villains. I held the badge right where they could see it, leveled my voice and said, "You're about 5 seconds away from committing a felony, impersonating law enforcement, attempted kidnapping, trespassing. You sure you want to keep playing dress up today?" Karen opened her mouth to speak, but nothing came out. Her plastic commandos were already starting to drift backward, like they hoped I wouldn't notice they were part of this disaster. I folded my badge back into my wallet and stepped forward just once. "Leave my property, now." And just like that, the toughest HOA task force in the county turned into a bunch of scared kids caught sneaking into a movie. They stumbled away with mumbled excuses, Karen throwing a final desperate, "This isn't over," over her shoulder. But even then, I knew. This was only the beginning. I watched them retreat like they'd just seen a ghost, Karen practically dragging her little plastic posse off my lawn. They didn't say much, just awkward glances and clumsy footsteps as they tried to maintain a shred of dignity, but the air was thick with embarrassment. And you know what? I didn't feel a shred of satisfaction. Not yet, because in my gut, I knew Karen wasn't the type to take a loss and move on. No, this woman was the kind of person who kept a whiteboard full of grudges and wrote your name in permanent marker. And the way she turned around just before stepping off the sidewalk gave me that tight-lipped smirk and hissed, "This isn't over." Yeah, that was her promise. She wasn't backing down. She was regrouping. I went back inside, badge tucked away, mind spinning. I wasn't worried, not in the slightest. I've faced people with real power, real resources, and real weapons. Karen? She was a minor inconvenience. But still, there's something especially irritating about a person who has no power but pretends they do. I wasn't going to escalate things, but I sure as hell wasn't going to be quiet while someone tried to turn my own neighborhood into a bootleg police state. I figured I'd give her a chance to cool off, maybe reflect on how close she came to catching a charge. But I underestimated just how committed Karen was to her fantasy. The next morning, things got weird. I stepped outside to take out the trash, routine stuff, and immediately noticed something was off. No trash cans. Gone. Not tipped over. Not moved. Gone. Both bins, the big one and the recycle one, vanished like they'd never existed. I did a slow scan of the street, half expecting to see them upside down somewhere like it was a prank. But then I spotted her. Karen, across the street, arms folded like usual, standing on her porch like a gargoyle watching the village square. She wasn't hiding. She wasn't avoiding eye contact. In fact, when she saw me looking, she smiled. Smiled. The kind of smug grin you'd expect from a cartoon villain right after cutting the hero's brakes. It wasn't even subtle. She wanted me to know. She wanted me to react. I didn't give her the satisfaction. I walked to my mailbox instead, and that's when I found it. A fat envelope from the HOA, sealed with their official nonsense. I already knew it was going to be ridiculous, but even I wasn't prepared for the creativity inside. They'd listed out 5 separate violations. First, they accused me of misusing community waste services. Yeah, the same ones I was apparently now banned from. Second, they claimed I had an unauthorized vehicle parked in my driveway, referring to my truck, which is not only registered and insured, but also paid off in full. Third, excessive noise, which is rich, considering the loudest thing in my yard is the wind chimes. The fourth violation was for hostile behavior toward community leaders, which I guess translates to didn't let us arrest him with dollar store handcuffs. And the fifth, the cherry on top, was failure to comply with dispute resolution protocol, as if this HOA had a legal arbitration system in place, and not just a group of retired busybodies scribbling penalties on printer paper. But it didn't stop there. The letter included a list of consequences for non-compliance. According to this document, I was now restricted from using certain neighborhood amenities, like the clubhouse I've never stepped foot in, and required to attend a mandatory behavior review meeting with the HOA board. I couldn't help but laugh out loud. Karen had officially moved from passive-aggressive to fully delusional. She just tried to arrest me, failed, and now was trying to punish me like I was some teenager who missed curfew. I tore the letter in half right there on the driveway and let the pieces fall. My yard, my driveway, my life. She didn't get to write the rules here. And yet, like clockwork, that same afternoon, she tried again. I came back from running a few errands, pulled into my driveway, and there it was. An orange traffic cone dead center, blocking my garage. Next to it, a wooden stake had been hammered into the grass, with another laminated HOA notice stapled on, like it was some kind of crime scene. The notice declared that, due to ongoing violations, access to my garage had been suspended pending resolution. I stared at it for a second, stunned not by the message, but by the absolute audacity. Karen had just declared my own garage off limits. It wasn't even creative anymore. It was just desperation disguised as authority. I walked over, tore the notice off, pulled the cone out of the ground, and tossed it into the street like it was trash. And just as I turned around, I saw them. 2 of Karen's little cronies across the road, watching from behind a bush. One of them was scribbling something down in a notebook, like this was an active crime scene. I could imagine it already. April 5th, 4:37 p.m. Subject removes HOA marker without permission. These people weren't just playing pretend anymore. They believed it. They'd bought into Karen's fantasy so hard, they thought this whole HOA fiction had actual teeth. It wasn't even 2 full minutes before Karen herself came storming across the street, like she was about to reenact a courtroom drama. "You can't remove that," she barked, gesturing wildly at the cone. I tilted my head, cone still in hand. "Can't I?" In front of my own garage. Her face twisted in outrage, and she pointed to the torn paper like it was a sacred text. "That's an official HOA order. You are in violation of neighborhood conduct policies." I was done pretending. I took a breath, made sure my voice stayed level, and said, "Karen, you have no legal authority. Not over me, not over my property, and not over this ridiculous cone. You can laminate all the paper you want. It's still nonsense." She opened her mouth to respond, probably to quote another made-up subsection of the Karen Constitution, but I didn't give her the chance. I turned, walked into my house, and shut the door behind me. But I knew it wasn't over. That look in her eyes when I dismissed her authority, that wasn't the end for her. That was fuel. She wasn't retreating. She was plotting. And the next time she showed up, I had a feeling she wasn't bringing cones or clipboards. She'd be bringing something a lot dumber. 2 days passed. 2 entire days where I didn't see Karen lurking behind her curtains, didn't spot her little notebook squad creeping around my yard. And honestly, it was unsettling. Silence from someone like Karen doesn't mean peace. It means planning. So I wasn't surprised when the next wave of nonsense hit. I was just impressed by how theatrical she made it. I'd just pulled into my driveway after picking up some groceries when I saw it. An orange cone, again. But this time, it wasn't just plopped down like before. This time it was staged, like some kind of HOA-themed art installation. There were 2 cones, a makeshift caution tape stretched between them, and a wooden post with yet another laminated HOA notice attached. But now it said, "Garage access temporarily suspended, pending infrastructure review." Infrastructure review, like we were under construction. I stood there for a second, blinking, trying to figure out if I'd accidentally driven onto a movie set. Then I saw her. Karen, sitting smugly on her porch, sipping iced tea like she was royalty watching her peasant get evicted. She didn't wave. She just raised one eyebrow, tilted her head, and dared me to challenge it. So I did. I walked straight up to the cones, tore down the paper sign, snapped the caution tape, and launched one of the cones into the street like a bowling ball. Not a word. Just clean, surgical removal of her latest fantasy. And of course, just like clockwork, Karen came charging across the lawn like a Karen-shaped hurricane. "You can't do that!" she yelled, marching straight into my driveway like it was her battleground. "That's HOA property. That's a legally installed community barrier." I turned slowly, looking at her with the kind of expression you reserve for toddlers who insist they're ninjas because they own a headband. "Karen," I said, voice calm, "this is a driveway. My driveway. You don't get to put traffic cones in it because you're upset I won't follow your fake rules." She was already turning red. She pointed to the torn-up sign like it was a piece of sacred scripture. "This is an HOA sanction. You are in violation." I folded my arms and took a step forward, lowering my voice just enough that she'd have to listen closely. "You don't have the authority to ban me from my garage, or my property, or even from using a trash can. The only thing you're in charge of is making yourself look ridiculous." She was seething now. Her arms crossed so tightly I thought she might fold herself in half. But I didn't wait for her to explode again. I turned around, went inside, and shut the door behind me. It wasn't even anger at that point. It was boredom. I was bored with this game. But Karen wasn't. See, when a narcissist gets ignored, they don't give up. They escalate. And her next move? Well, that one had the potential to go dangerously wrong. The very next day, while I was downtown at the precinct handling a completely unrelated Homeland case, I got a call from one of my neighbors. Not one of Karen's minions, but one of the few people on the block who actually had common sense. He sounded uneasy. "Hey, I think you might want to get home. There are cops at your house. 2 of them. Lights on and everything." I stood up straight. "Did something happen?" "They said they got a tip," he replied, "about a guy with a gun. On your property." That was enough for me. I left immediately, heart pounding. Not because I was worried about getting in trouble, but because I knew exactly where this was coming from. Karen had crossed the line from HOA drama into calling in actual law enforcement with a false accusation. This wasn't just harassment anymore. It was criminal. I pulled onto my street fast, and sure enough, there they were. 2 patrol cars out front, officers already talking to someone. And there she was, Karen, right in the middle of it, playing the innocent community protector. Her arms were gesturing wildly, her voice laced with fake concern. And if I didn't know her, I might have believed she genuinely cared about the safety of the neighborhood. But I did know her. I knew that underneath the pearl clutching and crocodile tears, this was all part of her plan. Frame me, discredit me, get me in real trouble so she could finally feel like the queen of the cul-de-sac. I parked, stepped out, and immediately one of the officers recognized me. "Oh, hey, sir," he said, clearing his throat awkwardly. I nodded. "Everything all right here?" The other officer, who hadn't seen me before, took a step forward, clearly just trying to follow protocol. We got a call. Said there was someone fitting your description walking around the property with a firearm, possibly threatening neighbors. I didn't even look at Karen. I just raised an eyebrow and asked, "Let me guess. Anonymous tip?" The first officer gave me a sheepish look and nodded. We figured it was probably a misunderstanding, but we had to respond. I could feel Karen staring at me, probably expecting me to shout or defend myself, but I didn't give her the satisfaction. I just folded my arms and said, "This woman has been harassing me for days. Fake arrests, fake citations, cones in my driveway, and now this." The second officer turned toward Karen. "Ma'am, just so you know, filing a false report is a crime. If this was fabricated, it won't end well." Karen gasped like she'd just been accused of robbing a bank. "I only reported what I heard. Some people said there was a weapon. I was just trying to protect the neighborhood." That's when the first officer shook his head slightly, clearly fed up. "We didn't find anything. There's no threat here. Let's call it what it is, a prank." I could see Karen's composure cracking, but she still tried to salvage her little play. "You're twisting everything. You're trying to make me look bad," she snapped. And for once, I didn't say a thing. I just stared, quiet, unblinking. Because sometimes silence is louder than shouting. The officers wrapped things up, told me to have a good evening, and drove off. Karen was left standing on the edge of my yard, flustered, red-faced, and without her little audience. She didn't say another word. She just spun around and stomped back across the street. And in that moment, it was clear. She knew she'd pushed too far. But what she didn't know was that I was just getting started. By now, I thought I'd seen every flavor of crazy this woman could cook up. But I should have known better. Karen wasn't the type to back off after the cops walked away. She was the type to double down, to take losing personally, and to treat reality like an optional suggestion. So when I woke up the next morning to the sound of heavy machinery outside my window, I wasn't surprised. Annoyed? Yes. Surprised? Not even a little. I looked outside and saw a full-on construction crew parked right in front of my house. We're talking a flatbed truck, a mini excavator, 3 guys in reflective vests, and 1 guy walking around with a clipboard like he was about to tear up a freeway. It looked like they were staging to dig. Not on the sidewalk, not on the street. On my lawn. My actual lawn. I walked outside in sweatpants and a t-shirt, still groggy, trying to make sense of the scene. One of the workers spotted me and gave a polite nod, like this was just another day at the job. "Morning, sir. We're here to start excavation on the underground utility line. Got a work order right here." I blinked. "Excavation? There's no utility work scheduled for this block." He flipped through the clipboard, pointed at a form, and there it was. A request for emergency pipe access due to suspected underground leak. Filed by the neighborhood HOA. Signed by none other than Karen Thompson, HOA president. I stared at it. The man looked at me like I might suddenly pull out a permit to stop them. "We were told it was urgent," he added. I glanced across the street, and there she was, Karen, sitting on her porch again, arms folded, smug expression carved into her face like a trophy she'd just won. She looked so proud of herself, like this was checkmate. I wasn't just angry, I was stunned by how far she was willing to go. I turned back to the construction lead. "There's no leak here, no issue, no authorization. You're about to dig up my property for nothing." He hesitated. "We don't really have discretion, sir. This came through the association. They flagged it critical." That's when I pulled out my wallet, flipped it open and showed him the badge. Homeland Security. His eyes went wide. He swallowed hard. "Oh, okay, I see. Guys?" he called over his shoulder. "Let's hold off a second." I didn't yell. I didn't need to. I just said one thing, slowly, so he understood. "You touch 1 inch of this property without legal authorization, and not only will your company be liable, you'll personally have to explain to a federal compliance office why you're taking marching orders from a neighbor with a vendetta and no legal jurisdiction." That was enough. They backed off immediately. The crew began packing up, clearly relieved they wouldn't be part of a lawsuit. I watched them leave, and Karen, sensing her latest scheme collapsing, came storming over like she was charging into battle. "You can't stop community maintenance. This is an infrastructure issue." I laughed. "There is no issue. You made it up. You filed a fake work order to sabotage my yard." Her voice went up an octave. "The HOA has full control over public-facing property, and that includes underground lines." I didn't even argue. I just pointed at her feet. "You're standing on my lawn, Karen. Not HOA property, and right now you're trespassing." She froze. "You're insane. You're twisting everything." I leaned in just enough to make my voice land like a hammer. "No, I'm just tired of being polite." She didn't respond. She huffed, spun around, and stormed back home. But I knew it wasn't over. Not with someone like her. I was expecting another round, and sure enough, I got it. In the form of a letter 2 days later. A thick packet shoved into my mailbox in a bright red envelope, like they were serving legal papers. Inside was a notice of disciplinary review. According to the HOA, my continued violations and hostility toward the community had triggered a formal review process to determine whether I was fit to remain a resident. That's right. Karen was now trying to get me expelled from my own neighborhood. The packet listed more of the same nonsense. Failure to comply with community ordinances, unregistered vehicles, interfering with safety operations, even a new accusation, creating an unsafe atmosphere for neighbors. Apparently, people were afraid of me now. Of course they were. Karen had been whispering poison into their ears for weeks. At the bottom of the packet was the kicker, an invitation to a mandatory disciplinary hearing in the HOA community room. Friday, 7 p.m. Mandatory. I almost tossed it straight into the trash. But then I thought, no, I'm going. Not because I cared what they had to say, but because I wanted to watch Karen fall apart in real time. Friday came. The room was packed. Rows of folding chairs filled with bored neighbors who'd clearly been promised drama. Karen sat at the head of the table like a courtroom judge, a stack of binders and printouts in front of her, all labeled and tabbed like she was presenting to Congress. The moment I stepped in, the room got quiet. All eyes on me. I took a seat in the back, arms crossed, waiting. Karen stood and cleared her throat like she was about to give a eulogy. "We're here," she began, "to address the ongoing and deeply concerning behavior of one of our residents." She turned to me, made eye contact like she wanted a duel. "There have been repeated instances of hostility, disregard for HOA protocol, and deliberate interference with community operations." I raised a hand. "Let's cut to it, Karen. You want me out of this neighborhood." She pretended to look shocked. "No one is trying to exile anyone. We are simply following due process." I smirked. "Your due process involves fake citations, traffic cones, false police reports, and unauthorized construction crews." A few people in the crowd shifted uncomfortably. Some looked surprised. Others looked like they were hearing this version of the story for the first time. Karen's mask cracked, just a little, but she doubled down. "This individual has refused to conform to the standards expected of a resident in good standing." I stood up. "I work for Homeland Security. I have passed background checks more thorough than anything your HOA has ever dreamed of. And what you're doing here, this isn't a hearing. It's a tantrum dressed up in a PowerPoint." The room fell into a heavy silence. Karen stood frozen, binder still open in her hands, like she'd forgotten how to read. One of the older board members leaned over and whispered something to her. She ignored him. She tried to continue, but the words didn't land anymore. The audience had shifted. The room wasn't on her side anymore, and she knew it. "This meeting is a joke," I said, walking toward the door. "But if you keep pushing, Karen, I promise you, next time, we're not meeting here. We're meeting in a courtroom." And then I left. But I wasn't even out of the parking lot before I knew. She wasn't done. She'd just lost the room, which meant she was about to pull her most desperate move yet. And whatever it was, I was ready. I thought the HOA hearing would be the grand finale of Karen's neighborhood drama opera. But no, she still had one card left. The big one. The all-in bluff that only someone with a complete detachment from reality would dare to play. She had just been publicly humiliated, lost her grip on the crowd she once controlled like a tyrant queen, and watched her narrative crumble right in front of everyone. For most people, that would have been a sign to back off, lay low, maybe even apologize. But Karen woke up the next morning and said, "Let's burn the whole thing down." It started with sirens, real ones. The loud, unmistakable wail of county vehicles rolling through our quiet street like it was the site of a drug bust. I looked out the window and saw 2 county code enforcement cars parked directly in front of my house, hazard lights flashing. I didn't panic. I just shook my head, because I already knew. There, across the street, standing like a proud little chess master admiring her final move, was Karen. She wasn't even trying to act surprised this time. No pearl clutching, no fake concern. She was calm, sipping from her coffee mug like it was just another lovely morning in the neighborhood. I stepped outside before they could even knock. 2 inspectors, clipboard in hand, official jackets, serious faces. "Morning, sir," one of them said, trying to maintain a professional tone. "We've received a formal complaint regarding several structural and code-related violations on this property. We're here to conduct a full inspection." I raised an eyebrow. "Structural violations?" He nodded, flipping through the paperwork. "Yes. According to the complaint, there's unpermitted construction, possible plumbing hazards, and even a mention of pest infestation." I almost laughed out loud. Pest infestation. The only pest around here was across the street, and she was watching this like it was pay-per-view. I stood there, arms crossed, letting the silence hang for a second before I asked, "And who filed this complaint?" The lead inspector hesitated, then turned the clipboard around. The signature at the bottom. Karen Thompson, HOA President. Again. She'd reported me to the county for issues that didn't exist, hoping that if she couldn't arrest me or dig up my yard or kick me out of the neighborhood, she could at least get my property condemned. I could feel the heat rising in my chest, but I stayed calm. "All right," I said. "Go ahead. Take a look. I've got nothing to hide." They spent almost 2 hours combing through every inch of my home. They measured walls, checked plumbing under every sink, ran their detectors across the foundation, opened cabinets, and peeked in the attic. Every time they passed through a new room, I saw their posture shift. More relaxed, less suspicious. They weren't finding anything, and I knew they wouldn't, because my house was clean, built to code, inspected, certified, maintained. Meanwhile, Karen was outside pacing the sidewalk, like she was expecting them to roll out with a citation and a bulldozer. One of her minions even showed up halfway through and started taking photos from the sidewalk, like they were trying to build a case for a Netflix documentary. Finally, the inspectors came back downstairs. One of them, a younger guy who hadn't said much, pulled out a form and handed it to me. "Sir," he said, with just a hint of awkward respect, "your property is fully compliant. No irregularities, no violations. Everything's up to code." I took the paper, nodded, and smiled. Appreciate your time. And then I stepped outside. Karen was already halfway across the street, trying to intercept them before they got back in their cars. What did you find? She asked, acting like she was an invested citizen, not the mastermind behind the false report. The lead inspector gave her a neutral look. Nothing. Property's clean. No issues. She blinked. That's not possible. Did you check the crawl space? The left side of the garage? Did you smell anything odd in the walls? She sounded desperate now, and the younger inspector finally spoke up. Ma'am, we've completed a full inspection. Your complaint was inaccurate. Repeated false reports can result in legal action. That shut her up. She looked stunned, like it hadn't occurred to her that her own lies could actually get her in trouble. I walked up beside her, folded my arms and said, You've crossed the line, Karen. You're not just annoying anymore. You're committing crimes. She tried to stammer something out, but I was already on my phone, filing an official complaint with the inspection department for harassment and misuse of public resources. And when she saw I wasn't bluffing, when she realized there were actual consequences now, she finally backed off. She threw up her hands, muttered something about me being vindictive, and stormed back to her house. But this time, there was no dramatic shout of, "It's not over," because it was. And not just because I said so. Over the next few days, things started unraveling fast. The complaint I filed triggered a real investigation. Turns out, mine wasn't the first. Other neighbors had been dealing with Karen's antics for years. Phony fines, shady rule changes, mysterious maintenance fees. She'd been running the HOA like her personal fiefdom, and no one had pushed back until now. But now, the floodgates were open. Someone dug into the finances and found missing funds, over $30,000 unaccounted for. Someone else found out that Karen hadn't even held a proper election in years. She just kept calling herself president, and nobody had the energy to stop her, until now. The board called an emergency meeting, and for the first time, it wasn't in the community room. It was in the city building. Official, recorded, supervised. Karen showed up flustered, but still trying to act like she was in charge. She brought a binder full of evidence to defend herself, but it didn't matter. The numbers didn't lie, the signatures didn't lie. And the neighbors who stood up, some of them who'd once supported her, didn't lie either. People were done being bullied by a woman who laminated her power and thought it made her untouchable. By the time the auditor from the county finished presenting his report, highlighting every shady transaction, every misuse of funds, every missing invoice, Karen looked like she'd shrunk a full foot. The board voted unanimously to remove her from her position. She stood up, tried to yell something about wrongful accusations, about lawsuits, about conspiracies, but nobody cared. Then came the moment I didn't even hope for. 2 officers entered the room. Quietly, calmly. One of them walked up behind Karen and said, "Ma'am, we need to speak with you." She tried to walk out casually, but they stopped her at the door. And when they pulled out the cuffs, the real ones, not the dollar store kind, Karen's face went white. I'll never forget the sound of those cuffs clicking shut. The same woman who tried to arrest me in front of my own house was now being led away in silence, her empire of paper rules and phony sanctions finally crumbling behind her. One of the neighbors muttered, "Well done, Karen," and a few people chuckled quietly. No celebration, no gloating, just quiet relief. In the weeks that followed, everything changed. The HOA got a full reboot. Fair elections were held. Fines were refunded. Rules were rewritten with input from actual residents. The whole place just calmed down. The drama faded, the tension lifted. And Karen, she sold her house, packed up what was left of her dignity, and vanished, Moved 3 states away, according to rumor. Probably trying to build another little empire somewhere nobody knows her name. But here, we're good now. Quiet. Peaceful. For sale sign still out front of her old place, and every time I walk by, I smile just a little. Not because I won, but because I didn't back down. Because someone finally stood up to the bully. And because now, the only thing laminated in this neighborhood is peace.